Hey, everyone.
No.
Hey, Chris, how are you?
How you doing?
Good. So we are having the tree hearing, just to keep everyone up to date. I'm in the conference room with Dennis Fazio and several residents who are here to talk about the tree hearing.
Okay, great. I think, is everyone almost here? Oh, no, we're just waiting for Maria and then we can start.
Sounds good.
Oh,
Yep.
there she-
Hi, everyone.
Hi, Elena.
Can you hear me okay? I'm like in my car and
Oh, yeah.
Clear.
Okay. I'm not driving, so I'm just sitting outside my daughter's dance class. So hopefully I don't have to go in at all, but if she needs anything, she can be a little needy during dance class. So if you see me jump off for a minute, that's where I've gone.
Real quick too, I don't know if Maria, if you were on, but Ann's in the conference room with Dennis Fazio for the tree hearing with some residents.
Okay,
So we're kicking off that, but I'll start now that everyone's here, we can start the meeting, but just so you know.
Thanks, Chris.
Thank you.
Okay, if everyone's here, I'd like to call this meeting to order on November 14th, 2022 at 5:31 p.m. First on the list, public participation. I know we got a tree hearing as well. I'm gonna unmute you.
The participation right now is just in regards to the tree hearing, so I don't see any outside.
Yeah, there was only one other person who was interested in the water irrigation, but I don't see him on. So he may come a little later where that was agenda item number 4.
Yeah, no problem. Okay. So let's just start off with the tree hearing. I don't know, Ann or Dennis, do you want to take it away?
Sure. So posted a tree hearing. We're actually posting for 2 streets. We're going to be doing multiple removals. One of them is on North Emerson. And we're looking at 6 or 7 removals on that street. I've been around historically with this neighborhood. It's been an ongoing issue. And the locust trees that were planted there are not the proper species for the location. The sidewalks have been done numerous times. Walls of cracking, driveways have been done, and we've chased roots. These are all high surface roots, these trees. So we're at a point now where we just need to go in, remove, grind the stumps. We're going to come back with different species after and replenish the area. So it's a safety issue, it's a accountability issue, and there's no other options. If we go in and try to open up people's driveways and the sidewalk second or third time, we're going to compromise the trees with the roots we grind. The trees are going to be susceptible to blowing over during the next windstorm. So we're at a point now where we just basically have to have a clearance sale and remove these problem trees. And as soon as they ground, we'll take them down this fall because of availability stock. We probably won't replant this winter. In the spring, we would come back and we'll come back with the right varieties. And as our process is now around town, we're putting smaller species under the wire side, taller ones on the non-wire side, working with the MLD with this, and it's working out really well. So we don't want to plant large species under the wires, obviously, that have to be trimmed and cropped and dismantled and can't do their thing properly. So we try to put smaller flowering trees on that side. So the residents are here. I haven't asked their opinion, but I'm going to go out on a limb and assume they're all in favor. I'll ask them in a minute, but that's it in a nutshell. We do have another street that is on Sycamore Road. I don't see any residents here from that. They're going to be thrilled. Oh, you are Sycamore. I apologize. Sorry, I thought you were there. So Sycamore Road is the same thing, actually worse, because the locust trees over there are a lot larger. Those sidewalks have also been done numerous times. There's been some sidewalk work done over there, so roots have been compromised. We had to take a few down at the beginning of the street off of Montrose. They're been line cleared. They're one-sided. They're listing now. And basically we're on the hook on these ones that do need to be removed, and the same process is gonna happen. As with a lot of tree hearings, a lot of times, depending on the resident's request, if it were a healthy tree, we would have the hearing, we would try to negotiate not to take it down, i.e. maybe if somebody was trying to widen their driveway, you know, we would put that cost on the resident and replace 2 new trees in its proximity. This is not the case. These are trees that have to go. So the town is gonna be incurring the cost on the removal, grinding the stump, and then we're gonna go back down through the neighborhood and try to get one, depending on the utilities, because utilities have changed over the years. We try to do 1 or 2. Our standard is 2 trees per house lot, and that goes back to planning board, board of appeals, zoning board, whatnot. We do our best to do that. A lot of houses have additional utilities now, gas and whatnot, so that sometimes limits it. But the whole idea is we'll go through that neighborhood, same thing. Smaller species on the wire side, taller species on the non-wire side, and just go through the whole neighborhood. At that time, we would do the sidewalks, any apron repair that we are on the hook for the damage from these past trees. And basically button it all up and make it all new again. So that's the process. So any questions from the board?
So Dennis, your timeline would be to take the trees down now and then do the sidewalk repair and shoring up in the spring, is that correct?
Most likely. This is getting kind of late to be putting on the highway department to go in and open up a couple 100 feet of sidewalk. I mean, the sidewalk's okay for the winter minus the bumps, tree roots. But we could, depending on the grinding, we could open up some panels and then make a plan to maybe just go in. Obviously aesthetically, if we're gonna be doing a new sidewalk panel, unless the sidewalk's perfect in between, it doesn't make much sense to go, you know, if it were just a safe Band-Aid for now for the winter, we'll patch in, but otherwise typically we'd want to just run the length of new sidewalk and go from there. And we
Dennis,
don't right now on, you know, the stock list on the nursery floors, there isn't anything now. There's nothing, they're winding down, so.
I think Elena had a question.
Yep.
Yeah, I'm curious, does the town have a policy of like a, you know, minimum of a 1-to-1, you know, for every tree we take down, we plant a tree? Or it sounds like if you're trying to do 2 in front of every house, that sounds like you're replacing certainly more than you're taking down, but I'm just curious.
We do that because we don't. I know every town has got a whole different situation around New England. Some do try to do inch per capita if we were really trying to punish a resident or somebody that harmfully took down a public shade tree. But this isn't the case. We're taking down a 12-inch problematic tree, and we can put back 2-inch caliper trees and watch them grow safely, and it's still going to look. It's going to look more even. It's going to look aesthetic, and in a few seasons, it'll start being back to a shade lined street. So, and again, we shoot for 2, but because of utilities now, electrical, gas, whatnot, water and sewer hasn't changed per se, but the add-on of gas and underground stuff that people have added to their house changes the situation.
Okay, thanks. And one other question I have, actually more of a comment. I've noticed you've planted a ton of trees recently around Greenwood, around Grafton Street and those surrounding streets, and they look fantastic. And I have noticed the smaller ones under wires. With some of the smaller ones, I've noticed that the branches are awfully low and sort of protruding toward the sidewalks. So I guess that's just my one caution about the small underwire trees, is to make sure I don't know if you plan on limbing them up as they grow to be sure.
They will be. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, they will be. I mean, that's the problem with all the smaller size trees. You know, it's kind of a catch-22. If we try to plant 3-inch caliper trees, they're taller, but the root balls are twice as big and they don't fit into the grass strips. We're trying to give them a home. So
Yeah.
Lots of studies over the years about what acclimates in, and now the smaller trees that have room to grow in their grass strips, they're finding actually do better than trying to stuff in, ones that had a monster balls. And it's been a problem over the years. Grass strips have been getting smaller, and the nursery stock, the B&B stock, the balls have been getting bigger. So there used to be a variable size between certain trees and caliber sizes. Now it's it's one root ball, depending on whether you're getting an 1.5 inch, 2 inch, or a 3 inch caliber. And if they don't fit, now it's, it's pointless for us to be stuffing them into an area that they're just gonna die. So, and cause more problems with root flare, sidewalk flare, pushing the curbs out, et cetera.
All right,
So-
great. Well, the new trees look great. So thank you for all that.
Yeah, we're at a point now where, these trees from the 70s they've reached their mark, and because of safety and being compromised and whatnot. So it's time to just, the quicker we can move on and get a new forest growing, then the sooner everyone can enjoy it. So it's really basically out there moving forward. So, any other questions?
I don't have any. Did any of the residents want to say anything? I don't know if they came to
Yeah,
actually say anything, but they could.
Yep. So
They're
go
more
ahead.
than welcome to, so.
That's right.
Yeah, I was just wondering, so the root has gone up our wall into our driveway. So we have to repair our driveway. So when the tree's down, I am assuming that you guys will go into my driveway and take that root out. And I just need to know if that's the case.
Yeah,
Because we've already spent money on it once doing it.
Yeah.
And we've already patched half our driveway. And so I just don't want to have to incur with that cost again. I mean, so I think it's something, plus it ruined our wall. Our wall has a huge crack up the front of the side of the driveway and down. And so it's like it's not just like a little spot in our driveway, it's all the way down. So, and that's what so I don't know, like.
Yeah.
When we can have it paved.
I
I need to know that, like, that's what I need to know.
Well, if you want a day, I can't give you a day.
No,
of
I
the
know,
day the
but-
driveway's gonna be paved. That's not, I can't
Right.
guarantee that it's actually gonna get done before the snow flies because the plant and weather plummets over the next 2 weeks. Plant starts slowing down. We have to open it up. Our big thing is we don't wanna open up the driveway, get it in gravel, and then we're scrambling for mix and it's too cold and then it doesn't stick. And then the spring it comes out lousy and then it's a
Right.
whole.
Well, we
slew of
have to
things. So,
redo our whole
yeah.
driveway,
So,
so.
yeah, I mean, we'll have to go and check out what, how far, I do know that it goes up and.
Yeah, you saw it.
I saw the trench and this and that. I mean, typically, the town tries to make good on it when it's the apron or something in the proximity of it is, and then, if we have to go up, then we'll have to make an assessment and make sure that, when we go in there, there's an agreement of what we're gonna do, how far we're gonna do, we're not gonna go 70 feet back, but we'll go in a respectable amount and do it. And then obviously before we start guaranteeing that we're gonna do every single full driveway on the neighborhood, we usually go and make it safe, but I did see the trench from the last time, so.
Yeah, like it hasn't lost, but I just always worry that someone's
Yeah.
gonna end up falling in that driveway.
But I
That's
mean,
my
we can
problem.
open it up, one thing is we can open it up, chase the one root, now that the stump is gonna get ground, we chase the root. That gets patched in, you're not gonna have a root problem there again.
Right.
It's just, you're gonna have a discoloration on your
That
driveway.
root goes all the way down.
No.
It seems like, yeah, it just like goes, like I said, through the wall.
Oh, it just goes through the wall and at an angle towards our house.
Yeah.
That's-
I mean, we'll have to open that up, once we open it up and chase the root at that point, so we're not just gonna come in and say, all right, we're gonna open it up and curb to curb, we're gonna go all the way back and
Right.
hold, grab into everything, we'll chase the root, we'll see what we see, and then if it makes sense to go in and scan, so.
Janice, we just state your name and your address, just because they don't know who you are.
Right.
Janice Ioshtua, 29 North Emerson Street.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
Any other?
Any other,
David Case, 27 North Emerson. I actually have one of the tree roots that's gone through my sewer line.
Okay.
I'm curious what the situation would be.
All right, so the town's policy on a sewer line is that the town's not gonna go and replace your sewer line. Okay,
Okay.
when we have a tree, even if it was a healthy tree, you have an old clay pipe separates over time or degradates, the roots are just going for water.
Yep.
Okay, this has been our town policy for years, so we could go in, take the tree down, and you still have a imploded pipe, be it imploded, cracked, or you have a separation. You take the tree down, that doesn't cure your broken pipe, which can clog and implode with dirt at any time, this and that. So that's why the town typically won't go and remove the tree when you have a sewer problem. You can get that relined, you can have it serviced. It's basically when they go in to redo a new sewer line, at that point, they're gonna compromise the trunk and the structure of the tree, and then we have to look at the fact that the tree might uproot and land on your house. At that point, the tree comes down, so, so the tree would come down, stump will be ground, sidewalk would be safe. Sewer line at that point would be their responsibility to get it either line or inspected.
Is there any way we can coordinate? Because it is blocked underneath your sidewalk.
What, I mean, how often are you getting it unblocked?
I've only lived there for about 1.5 years now, so it's happened once.
Yeah.
Just doesn't happen again.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, we certainly can get it rooted and, treated, you can, do your thing, which, the roots are still gonna survive for a little while, even
Yeah,
after the
probably
stump
about a
ground,
year,
so.
right?
But we're not gonna go in and chase the whole new sewer line, so.
Okay.
Coordinate when the stump isn't gonna necessarily if you were gonna try to do it, I mean, obviously you should wait till the tree comes down, but at that point, once the tree's down. You're gonna get a company to go in and do a sewer line, you get at that point, you could, start scheduling and get prices.
Okay.
Right, so,
That's one question.
yeah,
First, I want to thank you guys for listening to our complaints, because everybody thinks their problem is the only problem in the entire town. But I just quickly on the timeline.
Sorry, we just
Excuse me, could you please, sorry to interrupt you. Could you please identify yourself?
John Rinaldi, 21 Sycamore Road.
Thank you.
Basically, I just want to get the timeline. You're gonna come by before the winter.
Yeah.
Take the trees, stump grind, and then you'll be back in the spring to fix the sidewalks and plant the trees.
yes. If in the process, right in front of each tree, it's really bad and we can open that up and chase the root right there, we'll do that. Again, I'll have to coordinate with the highway and make sure. I just don't want to open up too much sidewalk and then not get mixed back and then it's left in gravel and then people are using
Yeah, no,
snow blowers.
Fortunately, we get bumpy sidewalks, but nothing like they have, so.
Yeah.
I just wanted to make sure I get the timeline, because I don't wanna be calling you in a month after you cut the trees down and say, how come no one ever fixed the sidewalks or
Yeah.
put the new trees?
No, I think it's safe to say that I just don't want to overpromise, and say that the sidewalk will definitely get done. I mean, we could have a mild year. and
Yeah, no, I
it's great.
understand that. I was actually hoping it waited to the spring, because
Yeah.
I was afraid if you did it now, it just would all come up again. And
Yeah, it might, it's stuff gets kind of, can get fishy when the temperatures aren't right. So we don't have to rush to do it. Right.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Daniel Lawn, 34 North Emerson. My main concern is there's already been property damage to my wall, my fieldstone wall in front of my house. And, that's the curb appeal to my home. I've had it, mortared and fixed, but now the crack is still there. So, it definitely needs to be repaired. My other question is, I have 2 trees in the front of my house. Will they replace an additional 2? Meaning, gonna take them down, will you put 2 in replace of it?
We would, if we took down 2.
Yep.
We'd try to get you back to us. There's 2 trees in the house lot.
Yeah.
Unless you have extended, frontage, then we try to put a 3rd in, but.
Nope,
Yeah,
nope.
no, if it's 2, then we try to just get you 2 back.
Okay, and the only concern is, what do I need to do in regards to the fieldstone wall?
I would say just try to get a quote.
All right, and who do I submit that quote
to Town
to?
hall.
Town hall?
Yeah, we'd review it and make sure that it's not excessive and that it's, that we
Okay,
can agree.
it's,
and-
no, it's,
Yep.
I get nervous. Little kids walk on the wall when they come home from school, and I'm afraid it's gonna tumble over.
I'm gonna
So-
submit one too, because my crack's all the way up
Yeah, it's
over
pretty
into the
profound.
driveway from the roof.
Yeah.
And then the other side of the wall, the root's going in, but it hasn't done damage yet. So it's done damage to the sidewalk, but not to the wall.
Yeah, once the panels are removed, then we, it's one thing at a time. First, we get the panels out in front of each trunk.
Mhm.
Then they come in, they grind, we try to chase the roots, we'll cut them at that point. You can't get the stump grinder right up against the wall, but usually if it's just a small. 2 or 3 inch caliper root doing all that damage. And
Okay.
we'll cut it with a sawzall, and then at that point, the root's gone and putting it back. It's, you know, remodeling, repointing the wall up and then going, so,
All right,
you know.
sounds good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yep, no problem.
Thank you.
Yep, any questions from the board?
I didn't have any, Maria. Elena?
Thank you.
I'm good.
Yeah, I mean, we typically don't try to, but we have a couple streets that are just been, you know, we have a couple on the west side that there's only one tree left from storm damage and whatnot. And, you know, it just comes to a point with all the claims and the damage and these have all been locations that we've touched before. Repaving, opening, chasing roots, do it again, walls recracking. We just, you know, I think it's time we have to just rip the Band-Aid off and go with another species. So. These locusts work downtown because they have, you know, 5-inch thick concrete sidewalks with brick buildings and they've got oversized planting beds. So that's why we've managed to get away with the locusts downtown, but in a grass strip sidewalk wall situation, it's a whole different animal.
Yeah.
Okay,
Joe, did we need to vote on that separately each street for approval or?
I would just handle it one vote per street in that you either concur or disagree with Dennis's recommendation as be presented.
Okay. I'll entertain a motion to approve. Well, let's start with Emerson Street's tree removal recommendations.
So that's North Emerson.
North Emerson.
I'm sorry, North Emerson.
I'll make a motion to accept Dennis Fazio's recommendation for tree removal and replacement on North Emerson.
I'll second that motion. All in favor?
Hi.
Aye.
Motion carries 3-0. Also entertain a motion for the approval of the tree removal and of Sycamore Street? Or is that Sycamore Road?
Sycamore Road.
Sycamore Road.
Sure,
Okay,
I'll
I'll
make a motion.
go ahead.
I'm sorry, Elena, I just thought I'd give
No,
you a
no.
break.
Go ahead.
I'll make a motion to endorse Dennis's recommendation to remove and replace the trees noted on Sycamore Road.
I'll second that motion as well. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries 3-0. Thank you very much, Dennis, for
Yeah,
your
no
time.
problem. Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, Dennis.
Right.
Thank you for the residents as well. Okay. Next on the agenda is item number 4, second meters. Will Joe or Ann be starting us off?
I'll kick this one off. So over the weekend, I apologize, it was a little later than I anticipated, but I sent a little background on this topic for context. Fortunately, I believe the group that we have here tonight was the exact same group that reviewed and voted on this last time. So the bulk majority of this should be new. I mean, excuse me, it should be the same. One thing we did a little bit differently, I couldn't find any data in any time over the last 30 years that this topic of second meters or irrigation meters has been brought up. We've always mentioned potential impacts, you know, to offsetting the balance between the water and sewer rates. So we decided this time around, we bring a familiar face back with you. So Matt is here from the Abrahams group again. And we went through, I believe 65,000 different records to come up with some predictable scenarios for you to kind of take a look at and chew on that are based off of actual meter consumption and data. So I'm going to kick it over to Matt in a second, but I'm just going to briefly kind of touch upon a couple of the things that I had sent out previous to this. So as I stated, you know, we're here tonight to start discussing irrigation meters or second meters and the moratorium that's in place that was put on at the last evaluation by this board in 2019. just for a matter of process. So what happens, much like the annual rate hearings, this board will evaluate the situation at hand, review any data, and then ultimately make a recommendation to the town council. The town council will then essentially hear the same presentation, although it may be a little bit abridged, and then they will also either confirm or change with their vote. That's what will actually be set into policy. So in 2019, the last time this board reviewed it, we said that we would review it again in 2022. It was 2022, and that's why we're here. So since 1992, is odd as this is to sound, so over the last 30 years, this topic has been reviewed 15 separate times officially, a combination of Board of Public Works, Advisory Board of Public Works, Town Council, Board of Selectmen. In 2009, the Board of Selectmen implemented the current moratorium on second meters. At that time, the reasoning behind their vote was largely due to operational costs, illegal connections, and theft, and then the impact of the sewer rate throughout the entire customer base. So today, and like we did last time, just to kind of paint the picture of what we're seeing in Massachusetts, but specifically as MWRA communities. So there are 38 communities, or 63% roughly, of the MWRA network that allow second meters for irrigation. We fall in the minority there. There are 22 communities that do not allow that. Another point of reference that we talked about last time that I bring up tonight, regulations as far as Wakefield is concerned, being a public water supplier, we have to hit a residential gallons per capita per day threshold of 65 gallons per person. So this means us as a supplier, we're regulated to have to comply with that. It's a pretty tough standard to meet. And currently, based off of the 2021 calendar year data, we sit at 57 gallons per day. The reason why that's not off of the 22 data is because we're not finished with the year and I don't have that yet. So one of the questions that came up last time, just to review. So what happens if we're above the threshold set forth by the DEP? So I can tell you, I'm sure Elena can elaborate, but the DEP actually has authority to implement enforcement action on the town, or specifically water suppliers that don't meet their 65 gallons per person threshold. So that is another consideration that we have to take into account as we're going through this. Another piece that we talked about, and I elaborated a little bit more on it in some of the stuff that I sent out for a little pre-read, but one of the discussions we always have is the potential increased capital and operational costs of, changing what the moratorium may be. So there's really two scenarios that can happen here. As I mentioned in the text I sent you, scenario one is essentially town-led, town-facilitated, where our staff that's on our books that work with us every day would perform the installs, all the labor related to these second meters and whatnot. There are some things to consider with that. Obviously, now we're utilizing town staff time to cover these services. If that was the case, we would also need an appropriation at town meeting to cover the capital costs to actually buy these meters, the remote meters. And then there's some other things too, like, there would be budgetary increases for staff time, the added amount of bills, monitoring, administrative costs, and a lot of the things that we talked about in the rate setting process. Scenario two would be something where it's essentially the same as far as the operation with billing and monitoring and different things like that. The difference would be that if the town were to reverse the moratorium, we could also do something where the customer would bear the cost. And what they would bear the cost of is the price for the meter, the reader, hiring a licensed plumber to install that, and any ancillary permit fees that may be associated with that. So under scenario one, I'm backtracking a little bit, so I apologize if I'm going to be confusing you with this, but if you were to have a quarter of the customer base take part in this program, we would be looking at an appropriation for capital expenditure in the neighborhood of about $780,000. The big difference with scenario 2 is that the customer or the end user that may be interested in the program would bear the cost for the meters, and we wouldn't need to take that out of retained earnings right now. Just to provide a little perspective on that, currently, after certification this year, our retained earnings balance in sewer is approximately $760,000, and our enterprise balance in water is about $1.1 million. So as you can see, under scenario 1, you're talking about basically using 70% of what we have available for emergency to do that. Another thing we always talk about all the time, especially during the rate setting process, that we should acknowledge now is, the sewer assessment isn't solely based on flow. So if you remember, Elena, I apologize if you've heard this 1,000 more times than I have, but we're essentially dealing with a 5-part formula from the authority. So we're using our average wastewater flow, population, our max wastewater flow, total suspended solids. I'll let you use your imagination of what that might be. And then something called biochemical oxygen demand. So what we're getting assessed on our sewer, sure, it is based on flow, but it's not solely on flow. There are other things that impact this. Largely the biggest driver in this, I think, and what has been certainly documented in the past is, the biggest obstacle for any board voting for one change one way or the other is the impact and what that might have on the sewer rate. So with that being said, we brought Matt in, we put the survey out that existed to try to gauge people's interests in town and get the temperature and see, would people be interested in doing this? Would they not? One of the things that we actually did that you will see as we move on in the next presentation is anybody that answered that and provided us an actual address, we use their billing data. So we use actual numbers, through the software that we use for billing so that we can go back and track it. And really what we're trying to do is get to an educated guess that is driven off of data and that's not speculative. One of the things we don't know is if we were to do this, we can guess what the impact will be, but we don't know how many people will actually sign up for it. And then, like anything else, depending on what the weather throws at us, we could be warm and dry and be consuming a lot of water, or we could be, wet and relatively cold, for the summer, and see different fluctuations like that as far as consumption is concerned. So, with all of that being said, if nobody has any questions, I could turn it over to Matt and he can kind of walk you through some of the work that we've been doing on this. Or we could stop and go through anything that I just talked about. It's totally up to you.
Well, thank you for the overview. That was very helpful. And I, for one, would be interested to hear what the survey yielded. And hello, Matt. Thanks for joining us.
You should be able to share, Matt.
Okay, thank you. Maria, we will be discussing in detail what the survey, what the respondents said in the survey, and some of the data issues that were encountered as we went through that information. So I have a few slides for you this evening with numbers on it and things that we want to focus on. You'll see familiar slides from some of our presentations in the past when we start talking about rate plans. And we've done a lot of number crunching, as Joe already alluded to, related to this. And we have a very large Excel file that has the data that backs up the slides I will be showing you momentarily. And we can dive in on that information if you want to know a little bit more, or if you want to see how we did some of our calculations. Also, we have an updated version of the rate study workbook that we used last year at this for rate setting in springtime last year for the sewer rate. So we can show you some of the things that we did for that too, if the discussion in that direction. So just be aware that there are 2 Excel files that back up the data that we're about to show you on PowerPoint slides, and we can dive into those if you want to. As Joe mentioned, if this program were to be adopted and people were able to take advantage of acquiring and installing second meters, we don't know how many will sign up. We have a sense of maybe the minimum amount. We have a sense of maybe the maximum amount. So we've kind of presented, when we get into these slides, we're going to show you a range rather than just saying we think it's going to be this number, because we don't know. So we wanted to give you kind of an order of magnitude to review and think about as possible outcomes for what could happen if this program were to be adopted. Slides on the screen now. Sorry, a sec. My other screen bigger. Okay, you should see this intro slide here now. Point. Do you see the objective slide? Okay. Yep, great.
Yes,
right.
thank you.
So our objectives with this, and as you may or may not be aware, but Ann, Joe, and I have worked on and off on this for the past few months. Really, we started talking about it right when the rate study wrapped up last spring. We started collecting data, we started looking at data, and then we kind of had a lull for a little while, and then it got reinvigorated over the last 2 months or so, where we've actively been looking at this data together on and off, basically on a weekly basis. So what we're showing you tonight is the results of all those discussions that we've had over the last few months, and we're pretty comfortable with this data. We went through several iterations of trying to get comfortable, and we were able to get to this one. So some of the objectives of the work that we've done over the last few weeks. The survey was mentioned. Town wanted to conduct a survey to gauge water users' interest in a second meter. Once we had the results of that survey and we started looking at the data, as Joe mentioned, we looked at 65,000 bills. The reason why we did that was we didn't want to focus on a small sample size. We wanted to focus on a larger sample size and use averaging. So what we did was we took 2 years worth of actual billing data for your users in town. One was the dry year, FY20, no, not the dry year. Wait, let me think for a second here. We did FY21 and FY22. 21, I think, was a drier year, and 22 was a wetter year. So we were able to use an average to kind of get in the middle of both of those scenarios. And we thought that was the right approach. We focused on the largest user group, which are meters size 1 inch and smaller. So we didn't include in our review anyone that was at a meter size larger. We wanted to, so starting to think about the methodology that was used related to what we were trying to capture, outdoor water usage. We wanted to understand the differences between users' warm weather usage and cold weather usage. So what we did for that was we determined an average of what their warm bills were and an average of what their cold bills were, and kind of use the cold as the baseline, because cold would be indoor water usage only. We're not going to use outdoor water usage during the colder months. And anything that was different between those two numbers, the warm and the cold, we considered outdoor water use. We thought that was a good way to come up. So then taking it one step further, generate possible scenarios of different amounts of users choosing to acquire a second meter, and then looking at the financial impact of those scenarios. So if you have a sense of how many people are going to use and calculate their bills and get a sense of what the impact would be on the sewer rate for that user group. Adjust sewer rate plans to make up for projected lost revenue. So if this were to be implemented, well, it's very likely you're going to see a pretty big hit on the sewer. So what might need to happen rate plans wise, make up for that lost revenue. And we did was, like I said, we used last year's workbook for the rate study. And therefore we were able to just kind of build on the rate plan that was adopted in the springtime. And as you know, from working with us, it wasn't just a one-year plan, it was a multi-year plan. So we could look at what the impact was over those multiple years and compare actual rate plan that was adopted to this new. On this, I move on. Hearing none. So we went back and forth a little bit on what scenarios to focus on. This one was one that was in the whole time. Scenario one, the low end. This is focused on the respondents of the survey. So Maria asked a little while ago about the survey itself and some of data that came in from that. This slide kind of walks you through that a little bit. The initial response included over 1,000 respondents. Pretty big. Now, of those 1,000, we learned that we couldn't use all the data that came in via the survey and then take it one step further to start doing these calculations that I was talking. We needed, if we were going to tie it to a particular account in the data that we were looking at, we needed specific information from the responses to the survey to be able to take that step. And some of that specific information either wasn't provided or just, if it was, it wasn't usable. It didn't track or it didn't equate to some of the accounts that we were looking at. So one example is there wasn't an actual address. So I think, I don't want to speak for Anne, maybe she can comment, but I don't think people in the survey itself were putting in their account numbers. I think maybe they were putting in their names and their addresses, and then Anne probably took their addresses and went ahead and figured out which account it was.
Correct. We even tried to do people's, if they put their last name and we could attribute it to a street, we would add those in, but many people left those blank.
Right. Yeah, and that makes sense. I mean, people aren't going to go, if they have to go dig for their account number, they're probably not going to respond to the survey, right?
Correct.
So, so basically Anne did her best on trying to take the information that was provided and then figure out which account it was. But in order to do that, you need either a solid name or you need a solid address. And in many cases, the address wasn't provided or it wasn't complete and it wasn't able to. We saw many duplicate responses. Maybe people just hit the submit button twice. Who knows? But we had to cut those down as well. And then there were other reasons. Some people who responded, they already have a water only account. Therefore, it wouldn't make sense for them to get a second meter and eliminate sewer usage. And some already had irrigation. So again, wouldn't make sense. So we cut those out as well. Over 500 responses did not indicate whether the owner would be willing to pay $375 for an additional meter. I believe those were cut out as well. So we eliminated those. It left us 325 respondents that we felt comfortable including in this scenario. And that's obviously a much different number than the 1,000. But we were able to link all those respondents' information to data that we could use to try and understand the financial impact of 325 respondents equal 3.8% all accounts. All accounts, I think we settled on a number of 8,600 for your current account date. Once we figured out dollars, we started running numbers on dollars. We came up with $123,000 of total annual sewer revenue impact related to those 325 accounts. So what does that mean? Well, what that means is we calculated what we think their outdoor water usage is based on the methodology I mentioned on the prior slide. And we basically eliminated that, the sewer charges related to that additional money. And that equals $123,000 yearly, annual. If you divide that by the number of users, you're at a $379 annual impact per account impact. So Maria, are we good on the respondent data, or you have some more questions related?
No, I think this is super helpful. I am astounded that you got 1,000 respondents. Like my jaw almost hit the desk. That's amazing. So fascinating. Thank you.
Okay, great. And there is a file, I think, that Ann could provide if you want to actually see the data that came in.
Yeah, that was done through Jen McDonald, our communications content manager, has a SurveyMonkey account. So I don't know if anybody's familiar with that, but some of the graphing and analytics to it is pretty sharp. So when we hang off when we conclude tonight, we could send that to you to take a look at. But that was a great resource to be able to leverage to get that out there, because
Yes.
I don't know how successful we would have been with just a leaflet in the bill.
Joe, I'm really interested in seeing the output from SurveyMonkey if you can send it.
Yep.
Thank you.
Okay. Hi. So we talked about ranges earlier. Well, we considered scenario one, the low end, 325 users. Likely would be a number higher than that, but at least we know that those people were interested in it. So they're kind of our baseline, our starting point. High end. So we're looking at a number higher than the 325. How high do we go? And we thought about this one for a while, and we did a few different discussions on a few different iterations. Joe had seen and continued to focus on a metric that he saw from EPA. It's considered a standard of 30% of outdoor water use, 30% of an account's or a resident's water usage is considered outdoors during the warmer months. So that does matter here. It's not 30% year round, it's 30% when they're able to water outdoors. So we started focusing on that metric, thinking that, okay, well, that's something we could kind of, we could use in our analysis. So what we did was we did a calculation to figure out, of all the data that we had collected, how many accounts had outdoor water usage that was 30% of their usage or higher. And we came up with the number that you see here on the screen. Over 1,900 accounts, 22.4% of all accounts have, in the 2 years that we looked at, on average, used 30% of their water usages outdoors. So we thought this could be a good high end of the range. And that's a pretty big number, 1,900. I'd be surprised if it went that high. Especially, so we did consider what happened with Melrose, right? Melrose, yeah. When they're implementing of the second meters, and our understanding of what the number is, it's well below that. It's somewhere in the 1,200, 1,300 range. And it's a similar number for the account base. So 1,900 seems high, but that's okay. I mean, I think it's okay to present a range where we think this is probably on the high side. So once we did all the calculations, we came up with $800,000-ish for the annual impact on sewer revenues. And that equal to be $418 per account.
Matt, can you explain why the impact per account isn't proportional to the amount of additional money? Like it was 123,000 or something on the other one, and it was a $300-something impact. And then this one is like, 5 times as high, but the impact isn't 5 times as high. So can you just explain why that is?
Try. I'm questioning my number.
So when I send out the, well, Matt's looking this up, when I send out the SurveyMonkey data too, that 30% metric that we got is through something the EPA puts out called WaterSense. So I'll show you exactly where that's sourced from. And one of the reasons why we were comfortable with using this standard, if you go back to when we actually set the rates, we use for the sewer flat, it's American Water Works, but we rely on the data from some of our bigger partners in the water industry to get some of that. So we felt that, where this is published by the EPA and, for all intents and purposes, they're probably, if not the most knowledgeable on the subject matter, they're number one or number two. That kind of led us to believe that this is something that we could use that's relatively concrete and we're comfortable referring back to. I'll share that with you when you get the other stuff too.
Matt, I imagine with regard to my question that some portion of that 800,000, I assume we would be charging second meter fees. And so, a chunk of that goes away in terms of the people, those 1,900 people would be paying those second meter fees. So that might be part of why it's not a proportional impact, but it still seems like a big difference or a small difference in the annual impact for a big change in the revenue.
I don't think the meter itself has a impact here, because we didn't do that we didn't involve that in our calculations.
Oh, you didn't?
No,
So you
we did
didn't
not.
assume that people would be paying 2 meter fees, like two base fees,
So
if they have 2 meters.
yeah, Elena, I see totally where you're going with that. We didn't include that because, believe it or not, so on the opposite end of the spectrum, that would actually end up being a benefit to the water enterprise. What we're trying to focus on was the effect to the sewer rate. So that was
Got it.
a conscious omission. If you want that number, I'm sure we could probably calc it pretty quick to show, although, the revenue is affected one way in sewer, here's how it's affected in water. The one thing I'll say on that though is I'm not aware, and the conversations I've had, I don't believe there's any legal means to shifting the money back and forth between the enterprises outside of going to town meeting and combining them into one. So
No, and I certainly don't think that's a direction we should be going. I guess ultimately, before we make a final decision, I think it would be necessary to know what the impact is on someone's total bill, as opposed to just the impact per user on sewer, because obviously if the people with the second meters are then paying more into the water fund, then the average bill might not go up $418. All of this said, I am against any version of scenario one where ratepayers pick up the cost of second meters. I think if you want a second meter because you want to do outdoor watering and you don't want to pay sewer on that, you should have to pay for the meter, pay for the plumber, pay for all of it. So I'm just kind of throwing that out there for everybody's consideration, that I don't see any benefit to anybody else other than the person who wants the second meter. So I don't see why the group as a whole, the town as a whole, should subsidize that.
I completely agree, Elena. Absolutely.
100% on the money, Elena.
Yeah, and then if you think about the lost sewer revenue too, right? In theory, you still need to try and raise as much revenue as you would if you didn't have the second meter in play. So that gets spread amongst all the other sewer users, all the other users that aren't taking advantage of the irrigation. So that's something to think about as well.
I cringe at any type of increase on someone's bill at this point in time right now. I cringe at it.
So
Well,
Elaine, oh, go ahead, Maria.
The only other thing I just wanted to say is this is what the fourth warmest year or something, and the rivers and the Colorado is drying up, and it just I understand there are people that still want to water and would like this additional meter. But I'll need some convincing to get to a point where I could endorse that. I really would. So anyway, thank you.
So to attempt to answer Elena's question, although I'm not sure she's, I'll say it anyway. in terms of the proportional thing. So all we did for this calculation was we just took the dollar amount. In this case, see my slide anymore. Are you even able to see my slide right now?
Yeah, we can see them. I think, Matt, she was referring to when you said 325 respondents, that 3.8%, and the impact was 123K. I think that's what she was referring to.
I thought she was wondering about the average calculation, bottom number on this slide. Or-
No, Matt.
Yeah,
think,
that's my question. Sorry, I get distracted for a second. My question is that the 807,000 to the $418.
Yep.
Seems out of proportion with, on the previous slide, I think it was 123,000 and then it was 300 something dollars. Yeah, and so I was just wondering, because it would seem that it's just a simple division of the total by the number of accounts.
Yeah, totally. It is. Yep. So I think the answer is that this slide represents your biggest users, anyone 30% and higher for outdoor water usage. Right. So that's going to be a group that uses a lot of water. This slide is, we didn't really look at where they fall on that spectrum. We just went with whoever responded, we grabbed their usage and we said they're included. So it could be someone who barely uses outdoor water. I mean, in theory, probably not, because they probably wouldn't have responded if, you know, if they're in theory, they're supposed to only respond if they want to take advantage of this program. And if someone barely uses outdoor water, then you wouldn't expect them to respond and say yes, but they could have. So it's not a perfect apples to apples comparison in terms of who's included on this scenario and who's included on the other one, because this could be a group of small users plus a group of large users, whereas the other one would be a group of large users here. Not sure if that answers your question, but it helps.
The only thing I'd add to that, so, and then thinking, this is under the assumption that the rate is the same currently. So these larger users will likely be heading up into a tier 3, potentially tier 4 lane. To talk about, you know, a specific irrigation rate or something like that felt a little presumptuous. So we just tried to keep it in kind with how, you know, you're affected if you're running out of your bathtub or, you know, your kitchen sink.
So I'm going to move on. All right, and then for scenario 3, it's just the reason for putting this together was really just kind of something else to look at, almost an in-between slide for scenario 1, scenario 3. I'm sorry, scenario 1 and scenario 2. So in this case, we're assuming that you're still going to get to the high end that we just talked about a moment ago. But instead of just assuming it's all happening in 1 year, we're assuming it's happening in 2 years. So for year 1, what we did was we took the largest, the group that uses the largest amount of water outdoors, and we used the threshold of 50% to get to that group. 850 accounts fall in that group. And it's really 856, which is 10% of all accounts. Let's assume that they're going to sign up for and take advantage of it in 1. What's the impact? I have that as $519,000, 606 per account. And then in year 2, the rest to get to that other number that you saw on the previous slide. There's over 1,000 accounts to get there, 12.5%. And the dollar impact is $288,000 or $268 per account. The reason why we did that was because it's unlikely, if we go back to here, that 1,900 accounts are going to take advantage in year 1. That's also an administrative nightmare for the people trying to make that happen on the town side. And you could probably argue that this is as well, but at least this is a more likely scenario, trying to phase it in a little bit. And in theory, you would need to, you would still need to recover the same amount of revenue over time, but you wouldn't need as much upfront to make it happen. So it's going to show a little bit more of a different rate plan. All right, so that's a rundown of the different scenarios that we ran, and it's also relatively easy for us to run additional scenarios. So keep that in mind if you want to see something. So moving on, this is a slide that was part of our rate study presentation last spring, except we added the FY23 column table. And you can see that same rate was adopted on the sewer side, on the water side as well, for the 2 years that you write most portion of this table, FY22 and FY23. And then the same comments that we had, these are financial comments relating to how the sewer fund is doing in general. And basically the point is that the changes have been taking place in the recent past. The sewer fund is managing fine. It's able to cover its expenses. This slide probably looks familiar. This is the council approved the actual rate plan that was, well, approved the rate plan necessarily, but they approved the rate of 2.15% for FY23, and this is the rate plan that we ran to complete the 5-year look that we usually present to everybody. You may recall that this was not the option that was originally presented to them as recommended option that this board recommended. That included 3.5% in FY23 and 5% in the 4 subsequent years, FY24 through FY27. And you can see the people that once they were focused on the 2.15, that's going to mean that the subsequent years go up. So generally, we've been trying to target an 8.5% retained earnings balance, which, you know, it's a good balance to target. We probably would ultimately like it to be a little bit higher. We're also trying to be sensitive to not increasing rates necessarily more than they have to be. So we've been focused on 8.5. So this is just a refresher for you, so you can understand what the rate plan was when rates were adopted in the springtime. So focus on that 5.75% because those numbers are about to change. So if you need to raise additional revenue, and this is a year, don't forget that those numbers we presented earlier on the scenario slides are yearly numbers. So for the scenario 1 low end, that 123,000, somewhere around there, that's an annual number. So whatever rate plan gets presented would need to account for the fact that that number needs to be raised annually going forward in order to get to the same place that the other rate plan. So in order to do that, we have the rate plan increasing 0.5% per year, FY24 to FY27. It was 5.75 on the prior slide. Now we have it at 6.25. And as we normally do, we provide for you that retained earnings graph, bottom right, trying to basically target that orange line. And we have the calculations for you in the bottom table as well. So you don't want to focus on the FY23 column because the FY23 is settled. That has been voted. Or focus on 24 through 27 and what the there. Any questions on that?
None here.
Okay, high end, and keep in mind that we know this is aggressive. It's unlikely that it would happen, but we still want to show you what we consider to be worst case scenario from a sewer user revenue standpoint. 30% of usage outdoors, we included all accounts that had at least that. As you saw earlier, it's over 1,900. The annual impact is $800,000. That's not a small number, $800,000. So this is what we have as an updated rate plan. Again, it was 5.75%. Now we're looking at 9.75%. And you can see with the graph that it actually drains retained earnings much quicker than you want it to. And then we kind of build it back up again. But at least this rate plan would keep retained earnings positive. It gets see the reds in that top table, it gets, that number is not that big. Let's keep it positive, and then it starts to build its way back up. So yeah, obviously a much more aggressive plan than what was adopted, but this is what we came up with as what would be necessary if this scenario were to happen. And then this is the in-between one where it stays. So the numbers are going to show a little bit lower. The rate plans are going to, the rate increases are going to show a little bit lower, just because there's not a need to raise revenues as quickly if it gets phased in like that. That's the high number because we're trying to raise ultimately $807,000 additional dollars per year. And those were the slides that we had for you this evening. So we're very happy to answer questions, talk about anything, find some more additional numbers for you, whatever you think.
Just looking to see if I had.
So understandably, we all know that this is a heck of a lot of information that we just presented. So really what the goal is with this whole process, from our side of the fence, let's say, is to make sure that the board has as much information as you all need to make the most informed decision recommendation to the council that you can. So I guess I would follow up with all that information and ask, is anybody uncomfortable with anything here? Would anybody like to see anything differently? Points of clarity. I mean, you don't be shy. We want to make sure that, you know, that there's nothing that's not, there's no questions really.
I think it is important to consider the impact on the water side. You know, just so we're looking at the whole picture. But I don't know, I find the numbers are always interesting, but in the end, I feel like it's more of a philosophical decision, right? Is should people who are using water outside pay for that water to go in the sewer when it's not going in the sewer? And then on the flip side, you know, are all of our conservation goals and sort of our overall philosophies on how we think water should be used and the value of that water, you know, does it get compromised? Second meters and having people get that discount on what they're paying right now, you know, because the way it's set up right now, it very obviously really discourages outdoor watering because you're paying water and sewer and a hefty fee on that. So I don't know. I feel like it's we can, I feel like the numbers are important, but I think the decision is more based on, you know, what do we think is the right thing to do?
So you basically hit the nail on the head. So the numbers are just one piece of this. Up until this point, at least in any homework or any digging through any old previous meeting packages and things like that, we've referenced the numbers. We've talked about, you know, the potential swing, you know, what may happen, what may not happen. That's why we wanted to add this wrinkle in. I feel like, you know, at least for the whole time we've been together now, which has been at least 3 years, we really made sure that we didn't leave any stones unturned. So we just wanted to make sure that, you know, what the board saw was as holistic as possible, you know, to be as transparent as we can.
Yeah, I mean, you presented everything here, Joe, with numbers and everything. Again, I think I agree with Elena too. It's really kind of what your opinion is on, you know, who should pay what, really. And, you know, part of my position where I sit on the board is, you know, I'm going to try to make my decisions based on the majority of, you know, the ratepayers and the residents who it benefits, you know. So I have a tough time making, you know, ratepayers pay more than what they are now, especially if some of them aren't even using a second meter and stuff. I don't think that would go over well. For the majority. I can't speak for everybody though.
I think one thing that's interesting is that, you know, if we were to be starting a brand new water system and sewer system from scratch, we would probably be looking at second meters, right? If we were starting fresh, it would be hard to tell the people who are doing outdoor watering that they had to pay sewer on that water. But
Right.
But where we are now, it is an impact to the majority, a big impact to the majority to change gears all of a sudden. So, you know, from a purely mathematical standpoint, I would think if you were starting fresh, you would say, okay, anybody using water pays for water, and then those using it, if it goes in the sewer, you pay for sewer. But another interesting point on that is that one way to make it help the majority a little bit that I know is how Melrose does it is if you don't have a second meter, you only pay sewer charges on 90% of your water use, because there's the assumption that 10% of your water, if you don't have a second meter, is being used outside or is being used in ways that doesn't go down the sewer. And so that helps to start to smooth it out a little bit in terms of the initial impact to all users. So that might be something to consider too, if we think we might go in the second meter direction.
How long have you been doing that, Elena, in Melrose?
The 90%, I
Yeah,
would say
curiosity.
6 years, roughly 6 years.
Oh, so you've been doing it for a little bit.
Yeah, we've been doing second meters for a long time. We had a moratorium on them for a little while and then went back to doing them again. Anne might remember when that was, because that was before I started. But the 90% calculation came into effect when we first hired a consultant, and really, well, we hired I guess, not to insult our prior consultant, but we hired a better, more detailed consultant. And that was one of the scenarios that we considered, and our city council felt that that was the more fair way to do it, that if people are going to have second meters, then everybody who doesn't have one, there has to be some deduction, understanding that those people also use their hoses and do some other, you know, outdoor water use.
Right.
So Elena, just a question on that. If you live in Melrose and you have 2 meters, if you're in that category, does that mean you're paying whatever the second meter is, and then you're paying sewer 100% on that other bill?
Yes,
Okay,
correct.
on that other meter. Mhm.
Right. So
Okay.
the 2 meter people pay 100%.
Okay,
And the single meter people pay 90%.
I see.
Elena, just so I understand where you're going with the other comment. So essentially, what would be helpful to drive an informed decision would be, so we obviously know we've calculated all of the sewer. What you're looking to see is that if more flow through the water, obviously is going to generate more water spread out over a bigger base. So you want to see, is there the possibility or potential that, you know, the water rate may actually either come down or not go up as high? You know, it might swing the balance that way too. So when you combine the total, it might even itself out.
Yeah, I would say I wouldn't expect people to necessarily use more water, although there might be a little bit, but that would be hard to assess. But I would assume that anyone with 2 meters is paying 2 meter fees, because all the administrative costs of reading all those extra meters and processing that data and everything else, you know, I would assume that we would charge the same water base fee twice to the people with 2 meters. In which case the volumetric rate would come down for everybody. Or maybe not come down, but maybe over time, it's just not as high of a percentage increase. So I think it would be interesting to see how that impacts a user's entire bill. And then the second piece, if we wanted to look at the 90% calculation, I know that's, you know, that's more work for you, Matt. But that might be interesting to look at too, because I think if you see what the impact would be on the user who doesn't get a second meter, an average bill impact, that's really, I think, the driving factor. Like if my bill was to go up, you know, $10 a quarter because of the second meter thing, then that might be reasonable. But if it was to go up $100 a quarter, then it doesn't seem worth doing.
Well, frankly, would you want to pay $10 more per bill, even if it is only $10 more per bill, if you don't have the second meter? I honestly don't think I would want to do that or ask anyone else to do that. If you're getting a second meter, is it not a luxury? Essentially, like, don't we pay for luxuries?
Well, and that's where it becomes the philosophical question is, you know, all outdoor water use is basically a luxury or a non-essential use. So do we feel bad that people are paying a sewer rate on that water, or do we feel like it's like a luxury tax and they should just continue to pay it? And that's where I think that's where the real decision ends up in the end.
I mean, Joe, you can always get a well, right?
So you could do that. There are obviously cost barriers to that. You know, and some physical ones depending on where you live. You know, we do an annual rain barrel program that we try to promote and get as many people as we can using that. Outside of those two options, you know, really the rest of it is conservation through, you know, either your actions, you know, or appliances or different things that utilize the water. But those are the two big alternatives, I guess you could say, to implementing, you know, this type of program.
Yeah. I just have a hard time with some of the headlines you've been reading in the newspaper lately about, you know, some projects going on in town and the effects of your taxes and stuff. I have a hard time, you know, making someone's bill go up. It's tough.
Can I, because you referenced that, it just pops into my head, but one of the things we focused on was the meter class of 1 inch and below. And that, you know, out of 8,600 bills, that does represent somewhere just north of 7,000. But Wakefield is a little bit unique because that 7,000 is mostly residential. You don't really get into some of the commercial stuff until you get over 2 inch. So I would say based on that, you know, that's one of the other things, you know, coming down the road that would have to be discussed is whether or not, you know, if you were to make a decision on the moratorium and it was to be recommend it be taken down, would you also make the recommendation that, you know, it's limited to your residential dwellings only, or, you know, do you include it across the user base? So it's just another thing to think of on that.
That's an interesting question. I mean, I wonder, you know, if it becomes difficult then where, like, if you're an apartment building with a management company running, you know, 20 apartments, is that a business or is that a residence? And, you know, that might become very complicated where people suddenly are going to care which category they're in.
Well, we already have that issue, don't we?
Well, we don't have a different rate for them though.
No,
Right.
you do run into a little bit of discussion kind of on those terms. Back when the town went to automated refuse, they basically classified the town as any dwelling that is a 4-unit or above 4 units, I should say, is to be considered a commercial entity. So that, 6-family versus a 4-family home, the 4-family home will receive curbside refuse collection and recycling, the 6 will not. So they kind of drew the line there. On the meter end, the easiest thing for us to go through is the size of the meter. Generally, the bigger the meter, the bigger the building. For the most part, we probably could look at the occupancy, but that would be now adding another data set into it and kind of making it a lot more gray when we're really trying to get it to like a black and white.
I see any distinction as really just adding work for you all, and if we think that you shouldn't pay sewer on outdoor water use, if you're willing to pay for a second meter, I don't know how you justify saying that only applies to residential, but that commercial should pay for sewer on outdoor water use. It seems like an all or nothing to me.
Might open a can of worms there.
Elena, do you guys have a separate rate for irrigation, Melrose?
No, most of the people who are irrigating with, in-ground systems are, they're up into the tier 2 rates by that point. So, they're more likely to pay tier 2, but we don't have like a specific separate rate.
Yeah, so, I mean, based off what some of these numbers here, I mean, I could give what I think my recommendation would be, but I'm not sure if, you want to proceed with that tonight and make a vote, or are you looking for some more info to digest?
So completely up to the board. So I would say that if there's any additional information that would make any member potentially more comfortable in their reasoning, I would certainly say don't be shy to request that before you're comfortable making a decision. So if there's something, Chris, Elena obviously mentioned a couple things, or Maria, that you want to see, I'll speak for the group, but we have no problem getting you exactly what you need so you're as well informed as you possibly can be.
I think my feeling is that if, since we're a 3-member board, and it sounds like Chris and Maria are possibly leaning toward keeping the status quo and not allowing second meters, if that's where the board is leaning, then I don't want you to go through the additional, computations and hassle of producing that additional information. Because again, if this is more of a philosophical question and the board is leaning one direction, the new numbers aren't going to change the outcome. So I guess it kind of depends on how Chris and Maria are leaning. And I'm fine either way. Honestly, I don't have a strong feeling on this. I think there are really good arguments in both directions. So, whatever the board, the majority thinks, I'm good with.
Well, I think I don't want to see anyone's rate go up who is someone who may be, not out watering their lawn every day. Someone who believes in conservation, someone who may not have a lawn to water. I liked the concept of if we did do second meters, having the 90%, getting a little bit of a discount for those who don't have the second meter. I don't know if that's something that you know, I guess what I'm also saying is, I'm not sure. Do we have rabid people in town like panting for a second meter? Perhaps we do. I don't know. I live in a household where you can't imagine the amount of water that comes out of our hose onto a lawn that still looked like, you know, an apocalypse in August. So, I mean, but we pay for that, and you know, that's I don't feel like the fact that my household wants to give a lot of water should impinge on someone else who might be more might not feel that way. So I guess the long and short of what I'm saying is, I wouldn't be comfortable voting for a second meter if others in the town are going to be impacted fiscally because of that, because I really think it's a luxury. I guess it is philosophical. So Joe, I don't know how we work through that, but you know, I don't know.
So let me ask you this, do you think that would it be beneficial for you to see if we continued this and went back and reran that calc and showed you the scenarios you just saw, or any scenario that you asked for, and we ran one where we did adjust the sewer to be, you know, a 90% versus 100% of those non-users, to really encapsulate that whole picture. You know, would that be something beneficial to your thought process? I guess is what I'm asking you to tell me. Because if it is, there's no reason why we shouldn't do that. You know, I mean, yeah, it's a little bit more math, and Matt will probably not love that I'm volunteering him for it, but we'll work through it. Because again, the most informed decision that we make is ultimately the best decision, right? So we want to make sure that we're all comfortable and, you know, can really stand behind, you know, whatever the recommendation might be at the end.
I don't mind running additional scenarios. We have a file set up. It wouldn't be that difficult. But if we do go with that 90% scenario, that's going to mean that sewer revenues are going to decrease even more on top of what we already have, just so you're aware of that too. Which is fine. We can run that. Just want to make sure that you're aware.
Yeah, it just pushes a little bit of the burden back onto the people with the second meter who are paying the 100%.
So let me play devil's advocate for a second. Let's if the moratorium was to be changed. So one of the things we would set is our residential water rate, and then we have to add in a new wrinkle to things where we would set the irrigation rate. So would it benefit seeing anything, you know, potential where the irrigation rate runs tier 1 to 4, just like, you know, in kind with other rates are? Would it be beneficial? I know some communities place premiums on that, so it won't drop below, say, tier 2 or something like that. Is there anything along those lines that we want to take a look at? Because ultimately that would be, you know, should we take a left at the fork in the road and go that way, that would be something that we would ultimately have to discuss as a matter of policy, and then ultimately build the financial piece to it too.
I think at a certain point, if you play with the numbers so much that the combination of the second meter fee and the water at the irrigation rate and the 100% on sewer versus the 90%, if it ultimately results in everybody paying the exact same amounts that we're paying now, then why bother, right? Like we can work everything in that direction so that people feel like they're getting a fair, right? Like they're not paying sewer on their outdoor water usage, which feels more fair. And yet their bills haven't changed. And I'm just wondering, you know, because doing a different irrigation rate allows you to push in that direction. I guess I'm just wondering what the what the end goal is for all that work. If it's just, you know, a few people who feel like what we're doing now is unfair, feel like things are more fair. And if there's benefit to that.
No, I think it all circles right back to kind of where we were in the beginning. It's just, those are some of the things that we see different places doing. You know, I don't think anybody from the town end thinks that that should or should not be done. Just want to make sure that if you want to see it, we provide it, put it that way.
Yeah, yeah. And I wasn't implying that you were
Oh,
saying we should or shouldn't do it. Just,
No, yeah, I know. I mean, I think we could have a conversation based on this and get into a lot of jargon that would be totally in the weeds. So
and you know, the funny thing too is if you get to the point where the bills are hardly changing, but the people getting the second meters are paying plumbers and buying meters, the only people benefiting are the plumbers and the you know, or maybe increasing job security for the plumbing industry or something, but and the people selling the meters, but it's not actually changing anyone's bill.
Well, that is a valid point, right? Because we have no idea how many people would bite at this opportunity, right? If we went with the scenario where you do everything yourself, correct? We're just guessing here.
no, and to refer back to, so I think it's the second slide that Matt went through. So out of that 1,000, we did have 500 that either said no or didn't answer that. So surely, you know, having to pay for a meter and a plumber to install it would be a barrier for I'm sure a lot of people. You know, for some it might not. Some might look at it like, you know, this is something that I'm going to use, you know, 3 times a week from April to November, and in the first year I'll recoup that, you know, expense back, and you know, I'll be in a good place, and you know, after a short time too. Kind of depending on who it is and what their situation is. Like I said, it's all relative.
How many of the 1,000 said they were interested in this at all?
So you had the 350, I would call them complete answers. So
Yeah.
that was the number where we had an address, we could get to the billing file, and actually use the data in there to point back to try to dictate what the tendency and the fluctuation in you know, the billing and then the consumption might be. Excuse me, 325.
And then how about of the other 700, how many of them checked the box for, yes, I'd be possibly interested?
You'll see it in the survey monkey stuff when we send it to you. One of the things you'll notice is like 123 Main Street might be in there 3 times.
Yeah.
So if we had duplicates like that, we recorded it once. There are other ones where, you know, there wasn't, like Ann had said, even if we got a last name, we could last name and a street number, then we could kind of work our way and manually go through everything. But I wouldn't know the exact data number that you're looking for without opening that up and seeing it right now.
Okay. I guess getting back to something that Maria said earlier about even if it's only $10 per quarter, it sounded like you still weren't leaning towards supporting it for the people who don't get the second meter. I guess I'm trying to get back to the question of like, is this just dead in the water and we should just vote it down? Or do we want to see more data and then decide?
I could make a vote tonight, or if you guys want to review that data that you want to review, I'm more than happy to, you can review it and we can make a vote afterwards.
So just one other thing that never is this ever, you know, this isn't the way that it is forever, right? So every time that this has been voted on, there's been a supplemental vote with a length of time. So the last year we picked 3 years, you know, see how the world changes and then we'll review it. So we can always, if that's the way that the board goes, you know, then there will be consideration to that. It's not like it won't come back up. So
Right.
it's not infinite.
Does it have to be 3 years, Joe, to review it?
It could be whatever we want. Typically, it's been 3 years just to let a little bit of time pass,
Collect data.
collect data, and then certainly so. It's probably intended so we're not going through the exercise every single year, because between now and July, one could argue how much substance is going to change out there in the world.
Right.
But I mean, it could be 2. It could be more. I think 3 years sounds like that was kind of the consensus through it all. It seems like, for whatever reason, that was the number that all the groups previous to us had felt comfortable with.
And Joe, I know you had mentioned all the different years where it's been looked at and, but it seems like review after review after review, it's been a no. Has it largely been along the lines of, because of the cost and the where, just the bandwidth of the town to oversee such a project? And the conservation side, do you have any sense historically why it's continually a no?
So it's been continually a no since 2009. In between, from what I have on record that I can actually go back and look through, between 1992 and 2009, there had been some periods where second meters were allowed, and then a block of years where they weren't. It looks like it volleyed back and forth. I could tell you, in the 90s when they were allowed, the homeowner was actually required to have a separate service connection. So you literally had a second service line run from your house, from your foundation, out to the water main, and it was completely separate from any of the potable water you'd use for your daily life. There are still some legacy accounts that obviously exist that way, but there's been nothing since 2009, and most of the reasoning behind that, like we've discussed tonight, the spread of the impacts to the rates throughout the entire customer base. Some mention, I know probably in the late 90s, early 2000s, there were a couple instances of theft, I think, that are referenced in some of it. And then obviously, administrative costs and things like that. Certainly, I wasn't here for it, but I would imagine in 2008, especially when the economy really started to nosedive, luxuries or anything that you might consider as outside of a must-have, were probably looked at and put on pause as kind of cost-saving measures across the board. I'm sure that played into it at that time. And then obviously there's the conservation piece, which 12 years ago, I don't know how big of an issue that was at the time, but certainly now it's something that people are certainly passionate about and that we have to pay attention to. A little bit of everything, I guess, is
Thank you.
the easiest way to describe it.
Well, it's up to you guys. I mean, I can make a vote tonight if you'd like, or unless Elena or Maria, if you want to review some more info, we can do that too. Before you make a decision.
I can go either way.
Yeah.
I'm curious, do the town staff have an opinion?
Not really. I think, all of us are kind of in between, two very palatable arguments on both sides, right? I certainly hear everything related to the conservation piece, and then I certainly hear the customer that is, prideful in their property and has a green lawn and would like to try to proportionalize, how that's balanced out. I think that the conflict is you try to be utilitarian as much as you can and do the most good for the most amount of people. But it really is, it can be very polarizing when you start to get into it, especially when you start working with people.
Yeah.
So, I mean, from our standpoint, I speak believe for us, and you can certainly correct me if I'm wrong, Ann, but we just want to make sure that, you know, we're doing, if that's what the people want, that's what we're going to do. I'll put it that way. That's what we're here to serve and make sure that your needs are met.
Well, appreciate all the information and all your research. I know that I remember looking at this 3 years ago, but I don't remember any type of a dive as deep as this. And I recall what came to mind to me when I was thinking about this meeting this evening was the administrative costs to the town to, you know, administer second meters, and then, you know, the billing, et cetera. And then just the conservation end, you know, in addition to the impact overall to the enterprise, with the, you know, the sewer revenue that we won't see. I guess, Elena, you're right, it's philosophical. I'm leaning to no, I have to say, if we vote tonight. As whatever we recommend, the town council is free to overturn. Is that not correct?
Correct. So much like the annual water rates, you know, whenever this conversation at this level concludes, they would essentially get a summary of what we discussed, some of the things that the board, you know, weighed, and then ultimately lying in a recommendation to them as to what the advisory board would recommend for their vote. You know, there'd be probably a pretty similar discussion to this at that level. And then they would make a vote to either concur with the recommendation here. They could certainly send us back asking for more information, or at the time they could also, you know, vote against the recommendation potentially, and change things up as they see fit.
Yeah, you guys really did a great job getting this info together, and to echo what Maria said, I can't remember us diving in like this. Like, I don't remember any type of survey going out to residents and being able to give feedback like that. So, you know, kudos to you guys for making sure that went out and putting that together. I know it was a lot of work, and thank you, Matt, as well.
Yes, thank you very much.
But I think based on the info that I've received and I've looked at, I think I'm pretty comfortable with voting tonight on this recommendation to the town council, whether to stay or not, keep the moratorium or not.
Can I suggest if we make a motion to recommend keeping the moratorium, I think our prior recommendations also had a list. I think it was captured a little bit, or maybe entirely, in the document that you sent out earlier, but I think we should continue to put forth our recommendation with that list of, if the council decides to go in a different direction, that they should include, you know, X, Y, and Z. And I think we should include that 90% recommendation for the sewer for people who don't take advantage of the second meters, as well as second meters. I can't remember if it was in there already. Second meters should certainly have a base fee. And we can maybe even recommend that we consider an irrigation rate, or that everybody on irrigation pays a minimum of tier 2 rate or something like that. Maybe it starts at tier two and goes up. However we want to do it, I think, you know, make sure that we get all these points in there so that if the council does go in a different direction, it's not without all of our feedback.
So that's an excellent point. So I would probably capture that by saying, while in attendance at the meeting, I would respectfully request, if that is the road that we go down, that Well, the moratorium may be reversed, that the advisory board be allowed to develop a policy related to it, and then that is included in the annual rate setting hearing. So, you know, should they vote on that between now and let's say the first of the year? Essentially, I respectfully request that this board have 6 months to put that whole package together and then, you know, make a policy recommendation to the council. So, you know, that's where we get all that, you know, whether it's talked about in irrigation rate, the 90%, and certainly the list of, I think there's 13 items that have been historically recommended that should happen before the change is completely implemented. You know, will all be included.
That sounds great. So then we would, if it did take effect, we would be able to do that in with the setting of the fiscal 24 rate so that we're considering it all at once, because that would be far easier than looking at
Definitely.
all the data and then looking at it all again for the next fiscal year.
Yeah, 100%. I think it's probably most appropriate to do it all at that time. And then, you know, as far as generating and setting up a policy, like I said, it's been 12, 11, 13 years, whatever the time has been. So anything that we might have had by, I believe, the Board of Public Works at that time, should certainly be reviewed and updated. And then as the board sees fit, we can come up with, you know, whatever the lane is that we want to operate in for potentially managing that in the future. You know, and bring that up as a kind of a part B to the discussion, you know, or actually part A of the discussion before they set the rate.
Is there any more discussion on that? That is a great idea, though.
Excellent, yes.
There's no more discussion. The chair would like to entertain a motion then to either keep the moratorium, I should say.
So I'll make a motion that the Advisory Board of Public Works recommends continuing to keep the moratorium on second meters. But if the council votes otherwise, that we would recommend a 6-month period to develop a policy and roll it into our fiscal 24 rate setting.
I would like to second that motion. All in favor of that?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries 3-0.
Okay, and then the only other thing is, do we want to set a time limit or a timeline that we want to acknowledge today via vote that we would bring this up for review? So should the council agree and say that the timing is not right yet for the changes and they concur with the vote of the board, when would we like to discuss this topic again?
Even though I don't like to talk about the same things over and over, I think maybe 2 years would be good, just because I think since the pandemic started, we've all been in such a different financial place. And I don't know, I think things seem to be changing maybe faster, or I don't know. I think 2 years might be good this time rather than 3.
It actually lines up pretty good. So then it would, if that was to follow suit, you would end up reviewing it on the even year. So the next one would be 2024. And then if it was to continue, it would be 26 and so on. So, but we can literally do.
I'm fine with that.
That sounds good.
Gives you enough time to get some data, but it's not too far down the road.
So I just need you to vote on that, Mr. Chair.
Oh, sorry about that.
Okay. I can make a motion that we recommend that we reopen this discussion in 2 years.
Second. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries 3-0. Okay. Next on the agenda New business. Actually, no, what do we have? Oh, I'm sorry. Water dispute requests.
So I don't have any to present tonight.
Okay, so we don't have any. Okay, item number 6, new business. Joe, anything?
I'll be honest, it's been kind of winding down, the construction season for us here. Most of our effort for this meeting was putting together the discussion on the water rates. So I don't have a heck of a lot of new business. You will notice that the mattress ban did take effect. We did partner with a company called Handout Mattress Recycling. Our first pickup will be, I believe, the first week of November, in
December 1st.
December 1st.
What are the rates for that, Joe?
So they are picking up, it's $60 per unit collected at the curb. And a unit is, so for those of you that don't know, a box spring is considered 1 unit, a mattress is considered 1.
Wow.
The tough part with that whole thing, I'm sure, I know you guys probably experienced it too. We don't know whether or not we're gonna have 200 mattresses a month or 20. It's kind of really a shot in the dark. So as time goes on, I feel like refuse is something we generally have a pretty good set of longitudinal data on. So our tendencies are pretty predictable. With this one, it's foreign territory. So it's kind of, we're working our way through it, unfortunately. So
I have a
Oh,
I
go
have a
ahead.
guess that the prices for companies who are delivering your new mattress, if you're buying like a new bed and you have a furniture company delivering a new mattress, I'm guessing that they're going to probably be cheaper to take your mattress away than the town will be, and that a lot of people will go that route. My concern is that now that, like, Melrose had subsidies from DEP through a grant last year, so we were able to pick up curbside for like $25, and we were able to accept deliveries at the yard for $10. Now we're looking at similar rates, 55 or something curbside. And I am concerned about illegal dumping. I think we're all just going to have to stay on top of those areas where people dump things illegally in town and make sure that we don't see an uptick in mattresses showing up there. But I'm hoping that the furniture delivery companies might start taking them back for a rate that's lower than our rate, and then we won't have to even collect as many.
I would imagine that the big boxes are definitely going to probably be right where you described it. I do know that Wayfair, believe it or not, I think Ann found the number at $125 for their service to come out and get it.
That's more than a new mattress from, the kind you can order on Amazon.
Yeah, right. Especially when they roll up. For
Yeah.
Marie, the thing that the tough part about this is, Elena, you probably experienced it too. The infrastructure for the recycling piece to it, for the most part, is relatively new. So, there's been facets out there doing that, in certain capacities. Well, now the tidal wave's headed at them. It's all coming. So, they're jamming to figure out, you have businesses that haven't really scaled up yet. They're trying to figure out, operationally, what can we handle on a day-to-day basis? And now you have 351 communities saying, hey, you're going to take my stuff. So it'll be interesting, but like anything, we'll just roll up our sleeves and work through it.
Joe, while we're on that subject too, of like mattresses, and I know that we brought up recycling too, just in some of my observations, I walk my dog a lot around the area where I live, and a lot of the times I'm over on the Vernon Street side, and I walk up to like downtown Wakefield by the police station and up in those neighborhoods up there. I'm noticing that a lot of them, there's lots of single family residences, but there's also multiple family homes around me. And I have noticed an abundance of like mattresses just outside of their house, just, by the curb, like they're, magically going to get picked up for like enormous amounts of times for an extended period of time. And I'm also noticing too that a lot of like the recycling bins that some of these, again, multi-family homes are using, 3 and 4 families when I say that, and more, the recycling is so overfilled that it's like there's just plastic and trash going all over the place. And where I live, it's just like a runway of trash. And it's not just where I live. I've walked around over by downtown and a lot of the other areas across the way from me and stuff too. And I have noticed a lot of that. I don't know if anyone else has, but I don't know if there's a way to like send out a reminder to people, whether it's, in a water bill or something, just, reminding people, if you leave a mattress out on the curb, you gotta let the town know to either come get it or you gotta pay for it to pick up. Like they don't magically disappear.
100%. So one of the first thing I would say is anytime anybody sees that, please let us know sooner than later. The other thing, so we can do a couple of things. We can leverage social media. Obviously, education in that space is important. I will phrase it as kind of old school in our approach sometimes. We do have someone, the majority of their task is kind of coordinating refuse and recycling amongst a host of other things that we throw at this person every day. But we do have someone that will actually go up and knock on the door and speak with people and work with them and to kind of, give them the heads up like, hey, did you know the mattress program changed? Or
Right.
need any help? Can I make any suggestions to try to take those scenarios that you describe and put the fire out, for lack of a better term, while it's small.
Yeah.
So we could certainly, the Vernon Street, or probably a Good Pleasant, that Little Neck of Salem, that's something that we can definitely, take the conversation to.
Well, because they're doing the right thing. They're recycling. It's just that their recycling stuff so overfilled by like this week and a half into it, right before, say, recycling comes, you get a windstorm and there's trash all over the place. And I'm talking, it goes across the street down into the common. I've seen it. I've seen it out in front of my house. I've seen it out over in the brand new, rail trail all along Vernon Street. All that trash just goes right across the street, right into where they just, picked up and have tried to pick up over the years and do all that work. It's just a reminder, that's all.
No, that's perfect. When's your trash day?
Mine's Thursday usually.
Okay, so we have 2 days this week. We'll have to see it Thursday to document it and figure it out, but I would say by the following trash day, which will get a little bit wonky because of the holidays next week, but say by the 1st of December, if you don't notice that it's starting to correct itself, follow back up with me.
Yeah. And like I said, you brought up a good point too, with the social media, like Jen McDonald and all the different, she's so awesome to have at your fingertips. She can blast out something in a friendly way too. I'm not looking to blast, but I just hate seeing all that plastic and trash all over the place. And I have a little dog and multiple neighbors have little dogs, and all those little bits of plastic that come into the yard, they're chewing on them, and they should be able to just hang out in their yard without having to chew on trash.
Understood.
Yeah, I think with the social media piece too, with recycling, the nice thing is there's not a limit on the number of barrels, right? Or the number of containers. And some people don't realize that you can stick a recycling sticker on anything.
Right.
And use it as a recycling container. I think some people think, I have these 2 blue bins and I have to fit everything in these 2 blue bins, but like, just throw a recycling sticker on another trash barrel and put it out so you're not overflowing. So it could be just a matter of reminding people, like, there is no limit to how much you can recycle, but try to contain it in the appropriate number of containers.
And I think you guys already did. I think at one point, I think you guys gave out free recycling stickers. I thought I got one in the mail at one point or something, or maybe at a fair I picked it up,
Anybody at any time can come and grab them. We always have them here at the counter, so.
I think maybe since we still use the bins, I don't know if, does everybody still use the bins? My family certainly does. But
the short ones, you mean?
Yeah, the old recycling bins, the blue and the red. But I think since people still use them, a lot of people probably don't realize that you're not limited to just the bin.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you're somebody that's, if you're not going to bring your cardboard to retake it at Nahat Street, certainly that Amazon box takes junk mail great. So.
Yeah.
the same assortment pile, so. Duly noted, and we will
Thank you.
address that.
Can I ask one question before we go? I know it's late, I'm sorry, but how did it ever end with the Wakefield Crossing condominium folks and their water issue? Did that get
So,
resolved?
no, he recently emailed me wondering if there was a disposition on what he had talked about.
Is that something we should ask Matt about at some point? I don't know if there are other buildings or similar with multi-units that. And I don't know if Elaine even knows about this because she wasn't able to come to that meeting, but. I don't quite know how are we planning to resolve that request?
So I do feel like that's something that we'll have to study, get some facts, talk to Matt, see what would happen. And it would be a charter change, I believe, or a bylaw.
Okay. That, to me, that sort of makes sense, Anne. I mean, I know, I don't mean to speak for everyone, but it never, their scenario, I don't think was front of mind for us when we were looking at the tier structure.
Sure.
Is this just multi-family buildings having to pay the higher tiers all the time because it's not averaged by the number of units?
Exactly.
And then
Okay.
I think the position was, the building's not constructed to sub-meter, the upfront cost of that, generally the builder is not in favor of paying, so. They put 1 meter in, then all the plumbing is buried, behind the plaster and whatnot. It probably becomes way more of a nightmare than what might be worth it to try to separate all that out. So there was a discussion related to some of that too.
I was initially, when I first got to Melrose, I was a big proponent of unit averaging for tiered rates. And I got talked out of it. And now I honestly, it's been 7 years and I can't remember why I got talked out of it. But I know when I first started, I thought unit averaging was the way to go. And I remember talking to folks with the state to find out what other communities were doing. And a lot of them were doing unit averaging.
The other thing that this board could do, we will obviously, we won't make it for Saturday's town meeting, but should this group find that that is a big enough need, you could also propose a bylaw change to say, we probably have to have a conversation with the ZBA and whatnot, but to say that any, something to the effect that, there's larger converted mill buildings, either must be sub-metered or, something to that effect, similar, like if you drive by some of them, you'll see 30 gas meters outside of the building. One of the things is you definitely don't see 30 water meters, but we could have a discussion based on that and, ultimately make a recommendation so that when they're reviewing these new building projects as they come up, that equity and fairness between the tenants is something that is caught pre-construction, so it's calculated into the cost of the renovation. And we could certainly do that.
Yeah, I think that sounds good to have a bigger discussion and a policy from the board.
Yeah, I mean, we brought it to brainstorm and then, either invite the chair in to kind of talk about that and see, but we could certainly do that.
Okay. Did anyone else have anything to discuss or any new business? No? What's the next meeting look like? So what's today, the 14th? Do you do are we looking for a December meeting, Joe?
If we want to, yeah, we probably should. If we want to kind of put it towards the beginning of the month, that way, where everybody's doing the holiday thing and school vacation. Yeah. Some of us that have kids, that can get kind of hectic.
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of open to anything, I guess, at this point. I don't know if does the 12th or the, that's a December date.
You want either Ann or I to reach out and suggest a couple of dates, then we can
It's fine.
discuss back with the email.
Elena, you're probably crazy at work too, I'm sure.
Yeah, my daughter's gonna have a lot of appointments in New York City in December for her treatment, so I probably can't commit because I won't know specific dates at this time.
Mhm.
But if you want to schedule something and then, I'll make it if I can.
Okay. We'll try to accommodate you too if we can, whatever we can do to accommodate you, let us know too.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, if Ann and Joe, you want to reach
Yeah.
out to us,
Absolutely.
it would be great. If that's everything, I guess we could entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All in favor? Aye. Motion carries 3-0. Meeting adjourned at 7:36 PM.
Thank you.
Awesome,
everybody.
thank you.
Thanks, everybody. So
Good night.
appreciate it.
Thank you very much, guys. Have a good night.
You
Good
too.
night.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night.